My wife, Abby, especially loved watching movies. To please her, it was enough for me to take her to a good movie. But it couldn't just be any movie. It had to be from one of four genres: animation, action-adventure, drama, or romance. She especially loved romantic films, often called girly movies. Abby also preferred films starring actors like Tom Torino, Matt Wright, or Brad Talbot, her absolute favorites. Our first date was when I took Abby to see the movie Sleep in Seattle. She wasn't particularly fascinated by Tom Hanks, but she really loved the plot. Years later, she confessed that she fell in love with me after watching this movie. The reason behind it is still unclear to me, even after 12 years of marriage. Abby remains as stunning as ever, with her tall, slender figure and dark emerald green eyes contrasting strikingly against her shock of hair. She has a truly fantastic appearance. Whenever Abby dresses up, she still turns heads. As for me, I'm John Sawyer, and I don't look bad either. I'm tall, of decent weight, with sandy hair and blue eyes. People often said we were a beautiful couple. As a student, I never had trouble finding female companionship. But when I met Abby, I knew she was the one I wanted by my side forever. I believe Abby felt the same way about me. We met in high school and fell deeply in love. Our bond only grew stronger during our 4 years at university, leading to our wedding just 3 months after graduation. Abby is not just my true love. She's my soulmate, my everything. Life without her is unimaginable. Although we cherish our 2 children, being spontaneous as a couple has become more difficult. Tonight was supposed to be special for just the 2 of us. We had planned to go dancing in the city with 3 other couples. To make it an unforgettable evening, we even rented rooms at a hotel in the city center. My parents agreed to look after our 2 daughters for the night. The evening had all the makings of being truly unforgettable. But things turned out unexpectedly. Upon arriving at the nightclub, I felt a strange sense of unease, though I couldn't pinpoint the cause. The women seemed preoccupied with something, and one of the men radiated a sense of complacency. Of the 3 couples, I particularly liked George and Helen and Bob and Anna. George worked as a software engineer, while Helen managed a household and raised 3 children. Bob owned a plumbing business, and his wife, Anna, handled the administrative side of things. The only couple I didn't really like was Chad and Thelma. To be honest, I didn't have any issues with Thelma, but Chad rubbed me the wrong way. Despite this, Abby and Thelma were college roommates and remained close friends, so I had to tolerate Chad's presence. From what I understood, Chad was involved in the film industry. He mentioned being an agent or something like that. However, he didn't seem particularly successful, while Thelma had a lucrative job as a pharmaceutical company representative. As for me, I worked as a financial advisor at a well-known brokerage firm. My career had been thriving. After reaching a certain threshold of clients, I was asked to mentor new employees and transfer some of my clients to them. Naturally, I kept the most profitable ones for myself. I've had to make this decision twice before and may have to do it again soon. Abby began her career as an administrative assistant to Mike Winston, the executive vice president of a regional bank. After our daughters were born just a year apart, Abby decided to stay home with them until our youngest, Stacy, started first grade. Later, Mike, who had been promoted to president, offered her a part-time position. Abby and I discussed it, and I fully supported her decision to accept. If you're thinking I regretted it or suspected her of having an affair with Mike, let me stop you there. Mike is 62 years old, bald, and completely devoted to his wife and 5 children. Back to our evening. I was looking forward to dancing with Abby and spending some intimate time together. At the nightclub, we met several familiar couples. Regular nights out dancing often led to such encounters. We also ran into an old college acquaintance, Fred Abbott, and his wife, Brenda. While chatting with Fred and Brenda, Abby and the others joined us at the table. As soon as the music started, there was a commotion at the entrance. A crowd gathered, and Brenda began to breathe heavily. "What's wrong?" Fred asked. "Don't you recognize him?" Brenda exclaimed. Turning around, I saw an extraordinarily handsome man. He wasn't very tall, but had striking features. Fred and I admitted we had no idea who he was. "That's Brad Bad," Brenda said excitedly. "He and his fiancée, Rita Summers, are Hollywood's hottest stars." Fred remarked, "I wonder if Rita Summers is here too." Brenda playfully interjected, "John, on a scale of 1 to 10, Rita is a 15. She slapped her husband's arm teasingly. Watching Brad, I realized he was one of Abby's favorite actors. I thought about getting his autograph for her. What happened next completely stunned me. Brad walked over to our table and asked Abby to dance. Without hesitation, she joined him on the dance floor. For the next 4 songs, they danced together while I sat at the table, annoyed. My wife didn't even bother to ask if I was okay with her dancing with another man. When the 5th song started, I tried to intervene, but Chad accidentally tipped over his glass and cut his hand. "John, could you help me?" he asked, looking between my wife dancing and Chad holding his bleeding hand. I decided to help him. In the restroom, the injury turned out to be minor. I helped him clean it and wrap it with a paper towel. When I returned to the table, I saw Abby leaving with Brad. Panicking, I hurried after them, with Chad following close behind. I saw Abby getting into a car with Brad. Instinctively, I started running to catch up with her, but Chad stepped in front of me, blocking my path and causing me to stumble. I quickly recovered and demanded, "What's the matter with you, Chad?" Grinning smugly, he replied, "Brad just took your wife for a ride." Thelma appeared at that moment and chimed in, "This is a dream date for Abby." She added that Abby had confessed to both Chad and her about her interest in Brad, and they had agreed to let him accompany her. "That's my wife," I exclaimed, my voice rising. "Don't you think I deserve to be told about this?" Chad grinned wider and said, "Abby told us you wouldn't mind. Just go with the flow." Disappointed and seething, I replied, "Forget it. You're the ones going with the flow." Then, overcome with rage, I punched Chad right in the nose. The satisfying sound of his groan was the only pleasant moment in an otherwise terrible evening. Suddenly, Thelma lunged at me, hitting and attempting to kick me. Luckily, Fred, who had witnessed the commotion, rushed to my side. He quickly separated Thelma from me and confronted her as she started yelling. "He attacked my husband." "No, he didn't," Fred countered firmly. "You both provoked him, and he was only defending himself." Panicking, Thelma called the police. When they arrived about 10 minutes later, they began gathering statements. Fred and I stuck to the truth, emphasizing that Chad had tripped me first. Witnesses from the crowd backed us up, confirming that Thelma had been the aggressor and that I had tried to avoid the confrontation. As a result, Chad and Thelma were detained. After the police left, I felt a wave of depression wash over me. I returned to our table, only to be greeted by Helen and Anna, who were smiling, oblivious to what had just happened. "Where is everyone else?" Helen asked. "Chad and Thelma were arrested for assaulting me," I replied, struggling to contain my anger. "Abby left with Brad, and she seemed pleased about it. Anna tried to reason. It wasn't intentional. She probably just went out with Brad, took a few pictures, and will come back." My wife didn't tell me the truth about her plans, I said bitterly as I walked toward the bar. Fred caught up with me. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked, concerned. "I don't know what's going on," I admitted. "I hope Abby just went for a walk with that movie star and comes back soon. But once she does, we're having a serious talk." Fred hesitated before saying, "Listen, John, I don't want to make things worse, but Brenda told me Brad Talbot has a reputation for stalking married women. He enjoys his conquests." My heart sank at his words, but I reassured Fred I'd be fine before heading back to the table. I tried calling Abby, but her phone went straight to voicemail. The tension was palpable as the other wives looked guilty while their husbands muttered in frustration. After waiting fruitlessly for Abby's return, I finally went back to the hotel. I called her every 10 minutes until 3 a.m., but got no answer. Exhausted and heartbroken, I left for home around 4 a.m. and collapsed on the couch. At 7 a.m., sunlight woke me, but Abby was still not back. There were no messages from her either. Out of desperation, I checked Facebook. My heart stopped when I saw photos circulating online. Abby and Brad leaving a nightclub, heading to his residence, and her being carried into his house. Hollywood gossip sites were buzzing with headlines about Brad's latest conquest. Burning with anger, I immediately contacted my lawyer. Even though it was a Saturday, he listened to my story and advised me to wait for Abby to return and explain herself. At around 11 a.m., Abby walked in, smiling broadly, but her smile vanished the moment she saw my expression. "Nothing happened," she said hastily. "We just talked all night. I know I should have consulted you, but I thought you'd say no. John, it was like a fairy tale for me, a dream to meet Brad Talbot. But I swear, nothing inappropriate happened. My love for you hasn't changed." Steam practically poured out of my ears. "Pack your things and go to your parents' house," I said sternly. "Why are you blowing this out of proportion?" she snapped. "It was just a conversation. Nothing else." "It's not a small matter," I retorted through gritted teeth. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone, and the whole world knows about it now. Those pictures of you and Brad are everywhere." Abby's defiance crumbled. She began pleading, tears streaming down her face. "John, please. I made a mistake, but I love you. Think of our daughters. Please, let's work through this. You didn't think about Stacy and Gail when you left with that arrogant movie star," I hissed. "How would you feel if they did something like this in the future?" Abby paled at my words and broke down sobbing, but I couldn't let her stay. After she packed her suitcase and left, I sat alone, consumed by anger and heartbreak. I saw Abby getting into a car with Brad. Shocked, I began running after her, but Chad stepped in my way, causing me to stumble. Regaining my balance, I glared at him. "What's the matter with you, Chad?" I demanded. Grinning, he replied, "Brad just took your wife for a ride." Before I could respond, Thelma appeared. "This is a dream date for Abby," she remarked. She confessed to Chad and me that she liked Brad. We agreed he'd accompany her. "That's my wife," I exclaimed. "Don't I deserve to be told about this?" Chad shrugged with a smirk. "Abby said you wouldn't mind. Just go with the flow." "Forget about it. You're the one going with the flow." I snapped, fury boiling inside me. Unable to contain myself, I punched Chad squarely in the nose. The satisfying sound of his cry of pain was the only pleasant moment of that miserable evening. Thelma immediately turned on me, slapping and trying to kick me. Luckily, Fred witnessed the scene and rushed to my defense, pulling us apart. "He attacked my husband." Thelma shrieked. "No, he didn't," Fred replied firmly. "You two provoked him. He was just defending himself." Angered, Thelma called the police. When they arrived, they began collecting statements. Fred backed me up, recounting how Chad had tripped me, and the crowd that had gathered testified that Thelma had attacked me. Eventually, Chad and Thelma were detained. As the police left, I returned to our table, feeling drained. Helen and Anna were still there, smiling nervously. "Where is everyone?" Helen asked. "Chad and Thelma were arrested for assaulting me," I replied, struggling to stay composed. "And Abby?" "She left with Brad." Helen sighed. "She probably just wanted some pictures with him. She should have come back sooner." I shook my head. She didn't even bother to tell me her plan. "I'm going to the bar." Fred followed me. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I just hope Abby went for a walk with that movie star and will be back soon. But when she returns, we're having a serious talk." Fred hesitated. "John, I hate to say this, but Brenna told me Brad Talbot has a reputation for chasing married women. He enjoys the thrill of it." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. My heart sank as dread took hold. I was certain that when she entered the restaurant, all eyes turned toward her. She was petite, with gorgeous blonde hair, warm brown eyes, and an attention-grabbing figure. But it was her smile that captivated me most. There was something about it, an essence that seemed to breathe life into anyone around her. I couldn't understand why Brad would ever dismiss a woman like her. "May I call you John?" she asked as she gracefully settled into the seat across from me. I nodded. "And how should I address you?" "Rita, of course," she replied with a soft laugh that made me smile. We ordered drinks and chatted for a while. I touched briefly on my profession, but mostly entertained her with funny stories about my daughters and my awkward teenage moments. When the waiter came to take our dinner orders, I hesitated to rush her, but I was eager to learn about her strategy. I was desperate to save my marriage and had no idea where to begin. After dinner, Rita leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful smile on her face. "Let's start with the fact, John," she began, "that this whole mess was orchestrated by Chad Tompkins. He fancies himself a big-shot film agent, but in reality, he's just a glorified pimp." I was stunned as she continued. "Chad specializes in creating situations where unsuspecting people, especially married women, get involved with celebrities. It's incredible how many lives he's managed to entangle." "You've experienced this yourself?" I asked, astonished. She nodded, her voice tinged with disappointment. "Yes, I was a victim of his schemes, though I didn't realize the full extent of his manipulations until recently. But I managed to hold my ground and escape his trap." Her eyes sparkled with intrigue as she added, "This is promising news for us. Still, don't be too hard on your wife. Brad is an expert at charming even the most virtuous people. Your wife isn't the first married woman he's deceived, but I intend to ensure she's the last." I was taken aback by Rita's compassion for my wife. Despite her past experiences, she was determined to help me. "If my plan succeeds," she said firmly, "they will both face the consequences of their actions. But even if it doesn't, they won't escape accountability. I can't guarantee the outcome for either of our relationships, but at least we'll have closure." Her resolve gave me a strange sense of comfort. "What's your plan?" I asked, curious. Before answering, Rita looked at me intently. "John, you're a handsome man, and you have a charm about you. Your wife made a grave mistake jeopardizing your marriage. If circumstances were different," she paused, her tone softening, "I might have been intrigued." I felt a rush of humility. "That's kind of you to say, but we come from very different worlds," I replied. "True, but you have a generosity and kindness that go beyond our differences," she said. "Despite everything, my interest in you hasn't wavered." I thanked her for her words, though I was eager to hear more about her plan. "And what's next?" I asked. Rita leaned forward. "In the next 2 weeks, I'll approach you as a client." "A client?" I asked, puzzled. "Yes. I'll make some investments through you, requiring us to meet several times. 2 at your office and 2 over lunch," she explained. "But there's one condition. You must not tell your wife I'm your client. You should continue seeing her to discuss reconciliation. After 2 weeks, allow her to return home but refrain from any intimacy." I listened carefully, still unsure of her intentions. "What then?" "On October 15th, you and your wife will attend a charity gala I've been involved with for years. It's a grand event with a unique tradition, a men's auction." "An auction?" I repeated, confused. Rita smiled knowingly. "Not what you're thinking. It's a playful tradition where women bid on men to collar them as their symbolic partners for the evening. This year, a married man will be up for auction, and his wife won't bid on him." I began to grasp her strategy. "And I'm the married man," I guessed. "Exactly," she said. "I'll win the bid. It will send a clear message, not just to your wife but to Brad as well. They'll experience a taste of the humiliation they've caused." As the pieces fell into place, I realized how brilliant Rita's plan was. Spending the evening with her while the world assumed the worst would shift the focus away from me as a victim and put Brad and my wife under the spotlight. It was both revenge and a way to lay the groundwork for healing. As the auction began, an elderly woman in the front row exclaimed, "I think he's worth at least $100. I grinned and replied playfully, "Do you know how to wash dishes, ma'am?" "I'll wash and dry," she joked, drawing laughter from the crowd. Another elderly woman chimed in, "That's more than my husband can handle." The bidding escalated quickly, from $200 to $500 in no time. Then I heard Abby's voice. "I'm offering $11,000. The crowd erupted in applause, but moments later, a younger woman raised the bid to $20,000. In the blink of an eye, the bidding jumped to $55,000. I glanced at Abby, who was watching in disbelief. I just shrugged in response. Then, from the back of the room, came another offer, $100,000. There was a stunned silence, not just because of the amount, but also the bidder's identity. Rita Summers. The audience erupted in cheers as Rita stood, exuding confidence, and said, "I don't even care if he knows how to wash dishes." The crowd roared with laughter and applause. Rita approached the stage, placed a familiar collar around my neck, and kissed me gently on the lips. By agreement, we returned to Abby's table. Abby looked stunned and speechless. I bent down, kissed her gently, and then accompanied Rita to a private screening of a new film. The movie was, in my opinion, dull, and Rita agreed. Still, we complimented the director afterward to maintain politeness. Later, a limo took us to a less than reputable part of the city. 2 cars trailed behind, which Rita explained were part of her security team. She pointed to 2 rundown houses across the street, noting, "The one with the porch light used to be my home. Brad lived right across from me. Back then, this was a respectable neighborhood." It was nearly 3 a.m. when we arrived at Rita's house, a 3-story mansion. She poured me a drink, and as I sat on the couch, I burst out laughing. I wish I had a camera to capture Abby's reaction. I said, though guilt gnawed at me. Rita sat beside me, her hand resting on my knee. "John, do you honestly believe your wife's claim that nothing happened with Brad?" she asked gently. I hesitated. None of us can prove anything, but deep down, I believe something did happen. That's why the pain won't go away. Rita nodded. "I understand, John. I'm almost certain Brad is having an affair with your wife. Maybe it's time to even the odds." Before I could respond, Rita leaned in and kissed me gently. I was stunned. At first, I thought we'd maintain appearances of closeness without anything real happening. But now, Rita was offering herself to me. Perhaps if I were a nobler man, I would have refused. But still reeling from the betrayal I felt, I found it impossible to resist her. We kissed passionately, and soon she led me to her bedroom. The intimacy we shared that night was unlike anything I'd experienced. The next morning, we talked and laughed, basking in each other's company. As the limo took me home, a sense of calm washed over me. I hoped Abby and I could start the journey toward healing. When I arrived, I found Abby in the living room, tears streaming down her face. "I wasn't sure if you'd come back," she said, her voice trembling. "The news is full of reports that Rita Summers paid $100,000 for an evening with you. At first, I thought it was revenge, but the way she looked at you—" "Abby, nothing untoward happened," I assured her. Relief and doubt flickered across her face. "Really? Rita is my client," I explained. She bid to make a statement, not just to Brad, but to everyone involved. "Was it revenge?" Abby asked softly. "Partly," I admitted, but she was also making a donation she makes every year, just in a different way this time. Abby threw her arms around me. "Do we have a chance to fix this? If you're willing to work on our marriage and attend counseling, I'll do the same, I promised." Abby nodded, and I kissed her deeply. That night, we began mending our broken bond. We sought help from a counselor named Wendy, who surprisingly was tougher on Abby than I expected. Wendy pointed out that Abby's decisions were premeditated and deliberate, even if they weren't physical. Though it was a hard truth, it helped us confront the issues in our marriage. In time, through open communication and trust, we found hope in our shared future, proving that even the deepest wounds can heal with effort and understanding. Wendy emphasized that seeking solace in someone other than a spouse, regardless of the circumstances, is a betrayal in itself. Abby blushed throughout our counseling sessions, but Wendy didn't let up, treating my night with Rita as a reaction to her fiancé's betrayal, which, in essence, it was. Wendy, of course, wasn't aware of my significant role in organizing the event. Despite the tensions, the consultations proved immensely helpful. One surprising outcome was that Abby stopped finding joy in watching movies or television, something she had previously loved. Now, she only joins the girls for children's movies. Regarding Chad and Thelma, I decided to drop the charges against Thelma, explaining to authorities that she acted out of a misguided sense of loyalty to her husband. However, I pursued the case against Chad, resulting in his sentencing to 3 months in a district detention center. Abby and I severed all ties with them, and Abby no longer speaks to Thelma. Their relationship deteriorated, with Abby holding Thelma responsible for nearly destroying our marriage. While I struggle to fully understand Abby's perspective on this, it's clear she harbors deep resentment. Meanwhile, Rita and Brad's wedding was hailed as the wedding of the century, with a guest list exceeding 1,000 people. A true Hollywood spectacle. Unsurprisingly, Abby and I weren't invited. Nevertheless, I sent Brad a wedding gift. A pair of bullhorns cut in half with a note that read, "Stay away from my wife and I'll stay away from yours." Rita later assured me that Brad found the gesture amusing, even framing the note and hanging it in his office. As expected, their marriage was short-lived, lasting only a year. True to her word, Rita initiated divorce proceedings after discovering Brad's infidelity. Their breakup was amicable, and they remain on good terms, though Rita confided in me that she genuinely loved him. It was evident from her words that they shared a deep affection, but unfortunately, it wasn't enough to save their marriage. Interestingly, Rita remains one of my clients. After opening her account, she deposited $1 million and kept adding to it, reaching a balance of $4 million. Although we haven't met in person since the auction, we FaceTime about 4 times a year to discuss investments. These calls, initially centered around portfolio updates, often extend to broader conversations about life. Rita continues to impress me with her sharp business acumen, showing surprising conservatism in her investment choices. Her political views, however, remain a mystery. On occasion, Rita teases me, jokingly suggesting that she should have chosen me instead of Brad. I usually laugh it off, pointing out our vastly different experiences. Still, her playful comments persist, adding an unexpected lightness to our interactions. As Abby and I approach our 10th wedding anniversary, I reflect on the challenges we've overcome. Despite the hardships, our marriage has grown stronger, and I can't imagine my life without her. Ironically, without Rita's intervention, I might have considered ending our relationship. Now, I'm more certain than ever that Abby is my partner for life. In addition, we recently received some wonderful news. Abby is pregnant. We're expecting a baby boy, and this new chapter fills me with immense joy and anticipation for the future.